Hello and welcome to this month's Crafting Together with All Brands vlog hop. The theme this month is Winter Wonderland. Now, do excuse the voiceover this time round. The audio failed on the original recording, so I am voicing over after the event. If you do have any questions, don't forget you can reach out on our socials. So today we're going to be using Pretty Arty-Tecture by Pretty Gets Gritty, and the tiny house dies, which is 664741 by Tim Holtz 46. Okay, now cutting wise, you're going to need to start with the Tim Holtz set, and we need 2 medium roofs, which I've cut out of rose gold glitter card, 2 of the medium houses out of white card with no windows cut out. Then we've also cut 2 more of those that are from the rose gold mirror card. Now you'll notice that these have the windows and doors cut from them. Then moving on to the Pretty Gets Gritty houses, you're going to want to cut 2 of each style that you want to use in your project from 2 different colours. And we're going to be cutting into these to make the detail. So just bear in mind as you're cutting that those 2 colours of card contrast so that you're building up your layers. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at our Pretty Gets Gritty houses. So let's take our first house, and I'm going to go for the simplest house to do first, just so that I can show you my method. So I'm going to work with the white card in the background and the honeydew card, which is this really nice kind of apple green card on top. And we're going to cut away the detail from our apple green card so that we can reveal the white card beneath. Anything that you want to pop right through to your background, you want to pop out that white card too. So you can see I've popped the detail out. And then you just very carefully go around snipping away the detail out of the windows. Now, if you have a really steady hand, you can do that with a craft knife and maybe take a little extra away as well so that you can see the frame around the window. It really is up to you and how kind of steady you're feeling on the day. And of course, if you're using a scan and cut in place of the dies, then you can use offset and do things like that. So it's a little bit easier. It's one of those projects where you will find it's easier to do in canvas. And then when you put the 2 together, you can see that you have that white detailing popping through. So we're going to do that for 2 more houses so that we have 3 houses to pop into the background of our little scene. So for our tall house, here's a bit of a trick for you. Rather than having to cut these really fiddly bits to stick on top to make the detail, we can actually cut into the shape to reveal the detail on the layer below. So I just cut off the roof section there so that that rose gold glitter card is going to shine through to make our roof. And again, we're going to go through and just cut those little bits out. Now, if your room isn't decorated by lots of little trimmings of window frames and things by the end of this, you're obviously not doing something right. Believe me, they ping everywhere, so just be aware of that. And obviously, if you do need to clean up as you go, do that. So I'll start off by very roughly snipping away at those pieces so that I can then tidy up after. So you'll see that there's a bit of a jump there. So you take out the centre and then tidy around. Then I'm going to use some red liner tape to stick it to my glitter card. Easy for me not to say. So, as usual with red liner, it's always a bit tricky to get off, so do use your pokey tool and try and take a bit of an angle down the side and it should pop off. So with this card you'll see that I'm using red liner tape for a lot of my putting together. That is just for speed. What I would say is, particularly if you are sticking items onto the glitter card, whatever type of glitter card that is, try and use a little bit of wet glue somewhere where it's not going to squidge out onto your card, just because it'll mark your glitter card, and especially when you get onto using the mirror card as well. So, and then I'm going to jump forward so that we've got our houses done. Now, if you have any details that pop out as you go, such as the door, just set that to one side and we can pop that back in assembly later. Okay, so now onto the main feature, our little 3D house. Now, I want this to kind of collapse and expand, so a lot of the work that I'm doing here is going to enable that. So we'll try and talk you through what I did. So because mirror card is notorious for not wanting to stick, you don't want to have it so that it is using that as your kind of main point of contact. So what I've done is I've cut away the glue tabs on my rose gold layers, and then the white card is going to do that function for us instead. So cut away the glue tabs on the rose gold, and that's going to make assembly a little bit easier. You can follow the score line, so it's nice and easy to see where you need to cut those off. And you're going to fold on that one crease. Now you want to press this really well, because this is a working hinge. You want that to be kind of really secure as a fold and really accurate as well. So make sure that the bottoms line up when you do that fold. So then you're going to see which way they're going to collapse. That is the natural way that it's going to want to collapse when it's assembled. So just bear that in mind. So whereas we cut those glue tabs off on this one, we want to keep those glue tabs, but because it's going to be working into that fold, we're going to be cutting down either side of our score line. So on these particular dies, you'll find that you get like an embossed section. You want to cut down that embossed line so that we keep our folding section nice and clear of card. That means then when we're folding and collapsing the card, it's going to work a lot easier than if you left that intact. You're going to fold your glue tabs, and you want to try and be as accurate as you possibly can. Now with some white card you can find that it does crack a little because of the size of the tab. So my advice is don't go for card that is too thick for this layer. Otherwise you can find it when you have that internal crease, it can kind of start to split. And we don't want that for hinges. And there we go. So you're going to fold all your glue tabs round. So those are ready. And you just pinch the apex of the roof on the white card as well, just so that you get a nice point. So then we can stick those into our house. And because we've done that trimming, you can see then our hinge section of our house is going to be much freer. So when we're sticking into our house, we want to make sure that our outside edge is lined up and that our inside edge is away from that fold. So again, on this one, I'm going to use some red liner tape, but you can use some wet glue. Just keep it away from the windows. You can also choose if you want to have your door opening, in which case you would make sure that you don't use any glue on the door, or you can have it closed. Now personally, for this one I went for having it closed. It really is up to you. And again, a little wet glue at this point will make that a lot stronger of a bond, especially as it's a working piece. So line that up, the long edge up to the outside edge. So you'll find there's one bit of your roof that's shorter than the other side. It's the longer edge to the outside. And again, we can do the same on that side piece as well. The better you can stick these two layers together, the easier it's going to be to assemble it and have it working. So it's worth taking your time and sticking everywhere. So what you saw me do there is I just used the excess piece of that little half strip of tape just to stick onto my top glue tab rather than wasting it. But leave the red liner attached until you're ready to actually assemble the roof. And you'll notice that I just pinch that corner just to get that line up right. So once you have your element attached, you want to work that fold and then seal together those houses to actually make the working house. So you can see here that you can then fold that house flat. And there is going to be one way that is going to be the natural way. So remember how I was saying about having it so that our idea fold is kind of the natural way for it to collapse. So just work it a little bit. Now, because our house collapses, we need to actually have a roof that will kind of go with it. To do that, we need to split our roof in two. So first of all, fold your roof pieces along the score line that's part of the die. And what I did is, if it helps, just fold it up against the edge of the ruler and then mark that fold. So up against the edge of the ruler, mark the fold. So then you can see where your centre line is. Now we need to mark the centre point of our roof. So, pretty impressed. I did that by eye and got it perfect first time. Don't trust myself to do it again on the second though, so you can just use a ruler and just measure that. Now, we're going to do a little hook style tab so that they kind of link up. So what you need to do is actually draw another dot a little bit to the right of your centre line. So like I just showed you there. Then we're going to draw a little hook and then make that into a tab. So I should show you in a little bit more detail in a minute so that you can kind of see that. So I'm going to cut round the hook. And you can see I'm going past that centre point, snip right into it, and then we have a hook, like so. Now we need our other piece to match this as closely as you can. So I'm going to trace around that. So sometimes it's easy to cut that thin strip that goes into the hook first. So we get that bit right. Now the trick with that little slit is to not make it too big that it doesn't stay together, but also big enough that it does slot back in as you pop the house back up. And before we go any further, you want to check that the roof latches, and you want to do that so they cross over, like so. So both tabs go to the inside of the roof. And as long as you've folded that tab nicely, it should always hook back to that centre position as you pop the card back up. Now, because it moves, on this occasion we're not going to be able to stick that roof to those two front and back glue tabs that you see on the kind of roof edge of your house. All you can stick them to is the side tab. So you kind of want to just fit onto the side tab and try and press it as much as possible against that glue tab and really kind of burnish it on so that it's going to stay stuck. If you're making this for a little gift box, however, you don't have to go to the extreme of doing this with the roof, and you can kind of have it a bit more solid so you can do things like lighting it and lots of other things using vellum. So, well, you could use vellum for the folding version, but you could find that over time it's not going to last as long. So it really does depend on who you're giving that card to. If there's somebody that's going to hang on to it, you're going to want that card to last as long as possible. So now I'm making my mechanism for my card, and I'm just literally scoring my card at about 1.5 centimetres. It doesn't matter so long as you're consistent. So if you've got a guide mark on your cutter and you're using a scoring blade, go to that mark. If you are using a scoreboard, then pick a mark and stick to it. You just want it to be consistent with every piece that you make. So I've actually kind of cut a really long strip here because I want to divide it up so that I've got my different tiers for my background. So it's an A6 card that I've literally scored all the way along, and then I can chop it up. And I don't overly chop it up very accurately. It's just going, okay, I need 3 strips. And that's literally, as I do it, 3 strips, not even measuring it. So don't think you're going to get bogged down by doing lots of complicated maths. The trick is all in the scoring and the trimming later on. Now, I am using some Creative Expressions Clouds and Hills dies. I think they may have been discontinued, but any Clouds and Hills dies will do for this project. So whether you want the stitched effects ones like I've used here, or just cut it by hand if you're feeling really brave. So we've got a little house here, and we now need to stick that to our mechanism. To do that, we're going to need to stick a little bit of card up inside just to kind of mount it onto that mechanism. Work out where you want it to go, and you want it so that your house, when flat, is away from those fold lines. And I'm just going to give myself 2 little pencil marks that are slightly inside the actual fold of my house. So that's the right hand fold and the centre fold when it's flat. And the reason being is that I just want it to slot up inside, and if we did it the same size as those score lines, it wouldn't fit. So just go slightly inside, and then you won't have any problems. Wait for the focus to come back. There we go. Camera misbehaving. So we want to line that up with those 2 dots we've added already. So a little bit of red liner tape. Again, wet glue. Let it set, because these 2 pieces that go up inside the house actually have quite a bit of pull on them really when we're folding. So you want them to be well and truly stuck. And same when we stick them inside the house as well. So I'll use red liner tape. You can add a bit extra with some wet glue to that. Wet glue will also give you wiggle room, so if you're a bit nervous about getting this right first time, that can be a really useful kind of tip. Okay, so we're going to slot this up inside the house. Again, making sure that our house will fold around that tab nice and freely. So you can see I work the hinge as I'm going to make sure all the time that that is working. So now on the next layer, we need that to match. So I'm going to offer up the mechanism, line up the score lines on the mechanism, and then draw those same dots. I'm going to take a bit more of that same card. Don't need to measure it on there again. And again, tape. And this time, you want to tape it so that it sits on the front of that mechanism, because it's got to go inside the house, if that makes sense. So it's going to go on the back there, but we're going to tape it so that the tape's the other side. Okay, so don't worry if you haven't quite got your little bit that goes inside square at the top. It really doesn't matter. It won't be seen. The other thing is, while we're building this mechanism, you'll notice that my roof is actually not attached. That's because it's just easier to just work with it for now, with it open. Otherwise you can find that those tabs get kind of damaged. Okay, so then I want another tier that's going to go behind that. But before we go too much further, I want to actually start to do some decorating of the mechanism. So, as we have our pencil marks and we don't want those to be seen, I'm going to cover that up with a nice piece of the honeydew that's been cut with the hill dies. Now, you'll notice that I've cut my hills lengthwise across my A6. That's so that I can get possibly two pieces out of the one cut, so that we can actually start to stagger the design. So if you decide to go really mad and have more than 3-4 tiers and actually go up to like the 6, 7, 8, then you can vary the section that you use, so it's not quite so obvious then that you've used dies. Okay, so I'm going to pick the section that I want to use, make sure that it covers that entire front section, but your glue tabs remain clear. So I'm going to fold my glue tab back from the card and trim it along that score line. I'll do the same the other side, fold back that glue tab, and then we can snip again. Now, for the next hit, it's a little bit more complicated because we've got the house in the way. So what you're going to do is actually do a little bit and a little bit, and then you can patch up underneath if you choose to. You don't have to. But particularly if you're going to be given this as the collapsing card, if somebody's going to be like looking at the bottom to see how you made it, you might just want to tidy that up. You don't have to by any stretch of the imagination. So I folded this flat and I've marked where the house is. And you can snip down to do like something similar to what we did with the roof if you want to, so that it sits there, or you can just trim it off. Again, stick that to your mechanism, fold back the tab and then trim. You can either stick your red liner tape to the mechanism or to the card, just as long as you don't let it touch the glue tab. So whichever you find easier for you. I'm quite lucky with that one bit of red liner tape that actually comes off using my fingernail. If I'd have had to use my poker tool for that, I think I might have cried. Okay. So what you want with each mechanism layer that you create is for it to be slightly higher. Number one, that will then hide the mechanism and make it look better. But also, if you think about perspective, you'll actually see that most landscapes will have hills and mountains and sky. So if you think about it building up like that, if you think a bit like a Bob Ross picture, you won't go far wrong with this one. So in this case, I'm just going to use some more of that same piece just to kind of fill in the gap. And it will stick out below the mechanism at this point, don't worry about that. So just stick that up underneath, just so that it covers that kind of white area. And trim. By the time that the bottom edge of that mechanism's trimmed, you won't see any of that showing anyway. So it's fine. So now we tuck in the tabs of the roof and check that everything is looking okay. So our next layer, we can start to think about our trees. So I've cut the cloud die from some tealy greeny glitter card. And again, I'm just going to pretty much wing that one by eye. The idea being that I might want to put some of that in the background, so I'm just saving that as an option. And again, red line tape onto the mechanism, keeping clear of those glue tabs. With animated cards, there's no such thing as too much adhesive, just because as the card works, it's really easy for it to kind of become unstuck if you haven't used enough. Okay, so there's our tree level. And then we're starting to think about where we want the first Pretty Gets Gritty house. So these are the flat ones. So if you kind of look at your mechanism, and then we can start to mount those houses onto the mechanism layers behind. Now, if we've got our flat house dies or maybe even stamps, you can still create this project with them. You just have to be a bit more creative with working out how to create that 3D house at the front. And I have got a video on the channel where I take a flat house design from Scan and Cut and actually turn that 3D, so it's probably worth checking that one out for an idea. So just using that excess piece just to give it a little extra stick. Stick that down onto the cheese, give that a really good press. And check the mechanism and decide if you want something else to go behind. So I actually ended up changing my mind and putting an extra kind of tier to go behind as well. But before I get that far, let's get our clouds in. So where I've cut my cloud die from this nice pale blue, it's more like paper than card, to be honest, this piece. I actually want the kind of negative of the clouds. And where you leave that cloud space might be where you attach your sentiment, or you can stick it on the front green bit of that mechanism. It really is up to you. So I quite like having my sentiment top left, so I will tend to always go for that kind of layout when it comes to the backdrop. Now, you'll notice here I'm doing a little bit of trimming. That's because we want to make sure that our blue actually fits inside of that fold line. It just means that as the card moves and collapses, we're not going to be creasing that blue paper. Also, because it's paper, I normally wouldn't use red liner tape with it. I would either go for something like a double-sided sheet adhesive before die cutting it, or you could use a Xyron. That will give you a nice thin layer of adhesive across your paper to stop it buckling, or finally just a normal double-sided tape. The red line tape is a little bit too thick really for paper to kind of disguise. So I'm going to line that up to the bottom of my mechanism, and let's have a look, see how that's working. And I'm kind of going, but actually that's a little bit short for where the house is to where the top of the actual cut, like the top of the background card is. Okay, so now we're going to trim our mechanism. Now, if you've done this from thinner card, you should be able to do this step with your guillotine, as I tried to do here. However, if it's too thick, then you're going to find that there's some resistance there and you don't want to break your guillotine. So at which point you want to bring in your trimmer, and we're going to line it up on our cutting guide. And because you can't exactly put this against an edge to cut, you just want to really press down on that cutting bar so everything kind of stays put. Then everything should be able to sit nicely. that in, and our main mechanism is sorted. But then I'm still thinking, I've still got some more houses here to use. So I just trimmed that one just to kind of neaten it up a little. So instead I go, okay, I'm going to kind of start on the sides, and then I do kind of change my mind later. So what I'm doing is I'm putting each of my glue tabs side by side by side as they are assembled. So you'll notice that with the house one they're slightly further apart. Then put a mark exactly where that front fold is. That gives you the size that you need for the sides of your mechanism. So I need another piece of card because I've run out. And I'm going to take that same card and just do the other side. Now if you want to add some shape to the sides before you stick on the mechanism, that's the time to do it. So it might be that you want to do like a rounded corner on that top edge. So then what I'm going to do to stick in the mechanism is just chamfer all the tops of the glue tabs. It's just going to make it that little bit neater. And reinforce those folds with a bone folder. So red liner tape to both sides of each tab. Even if you only work one side at a time, it's easy to do this all now when it's all flat. Peel away the first side, and with this back section you want to mount it right into that corner. So there's the top. Now you can see that I have a bit of a gap at the bottom. That is absolutely fine. We can use that to put a tea light in. It could be that you could actually use a short section of LED string lights if you want to put windows, light behind the windows. That's what I'm trying to say. Particularly if you do decide to try and make this with vellum as well, because the light will shine through. If you are going to do a tea light, you may need to adjust some of the other mechanism layers as well. It all depends on which one you get. So just bear that in mind as you're assembling, because it's easier to cut it now when it's flat than to try and do it when it's all assembled. Okay, so you want to make sure that you glue as close to that folding edge as possible, so that over time it doesn't kind of pull away from that side. And then you want another piece kind of at the end of that glue tab, and it'll just hold everything nice and neat. Particularly when you're going to be putting in extra layers than what you were planning. Spoiler alert. Okay, so I'm going to line that up so that it sits literally just on that fold. Pop the house together. It's quite important at this point that it stays together. Otherwise your glue tabs can end up in the wrong place. So I start to look at it thinking, yep, that's looking good. And I'm just going to put some glue tape on these. So you know how I said it was easier to do it flat? That's where I should have done that flat. Otherwise it can feel a bit like you're performing surgery. So I'm just going to light down so that I can get that red liner tape off, because those pieces weren't as cooperative. So again, if you just move that pokey tool down the side of the tape, you're more likely to get it than to try and approach it from the end. Fold the side over and then everything should be square and working nicely. Pop that roof back together. There we go. And like I said, if you decide that you want to do this in a gift box, you don't have to have that kind of roof. What you will find is that as you're working with the layers and stuff to put the mechanisms in, that roof will pop open. Don't worry about it too much. Doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It will come back once everything is kind of square. So I'm looking in there and I'm thinking, actually, there's room for an extra layer. So, where am I going to put my house? I don't really want to stick it to the back, because then that means sticking that little rose gold piece on. So, ta-da! By miracle, I'm putting an extra tier. So I've just basically mounted that to the same layer as a background, so the tabs actually kind of overlap if you look very closely. And I've stuck our final house onto the background so that we have our 3 houses, and they look really cool. So I'm just saying here about the tea light again, which I kind of already covered, but if you do want to do that, then it is easier to do that before assembly. So then you just need to decorate the outside of your little winter wonderland, and how you choose to do that is entirely up to you. Just bear in mind that you could also do things like add a little base if you wanted to, that helps kind of show how to actually pop that card up. Or if you want to do a mechanism for the top. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.